My name is Enno Tamm, and I work for an environmental nonprofit called EcoTrust Canada, based in Vancouver, British Columbia. And I'm here in Sydney talking about a new initiative that EcoTrust has launched called This Fish. And it's a seafood traceability system that allows consumers to trace who caught their seafood, how it was caught, where it was caught, and when it was caught. It's a system that marries new sort of social media technology and material traceability together. I call it faceability because it's really about a system that allows the consumer to put a face on the seafood that they're eating, the person that actually produced it, that caught it, that processed it. And it's a new system that was launched 2 years ago, and it's expanded from the Pacific coast of Canada to the West Coast. And now we're looking at piloting the system in Europe, the United States, and possibly even in Australia. So I work for an organization called EcoTrust Canada. I'll just recap. A few of you may have not been at the talk last night. So we're an environmental nonprofit based in Vancouver, British Columbia. I'm actually based out in Ottawa, in the nation's capital. And the purpose of our organization is to work on the conservation economy. And that's an economy that integrate social and ecological values into the productions of goods and services. We primarily work on the British Columbian coast, and we worked in the resource sectors, so fisheries, forestry, renewable energy, land use planning, and we typically work with local First Nations, local rural communities, and small businesses. So that's sort of the perspective that we come from. Myself, I'm from a long string of fishermen. This is actually a photograph of my grandma and grandpa and my mom on the left there, and some aunts and uncles. The photo was taken in the late 1940s in the small village of Ucluelet on Vancouver Island, where I was born and raised. And my great uncle had moved out from Newfoundland in the 1920s out there to become a fisherman. And when he arrived there, there weren't very many white settlers at the time. It was still a predominantly Aboriginal area, and the name of the town, Ucluelet, means the people of the safe harbor, or the safe landing place. So I was sort of born and raised in the fishing industry and went to university and have an academic background in communications and political science. So what I'm going to talk to you today about is really about those two things, about fishing, storytelling, and communications. So our tagline of our seafood traceability system, which is called This Fish, is discover the story of your seafood. And I just want to briefly start with the very beginning of the story. And that happens about 2 million years ago, when the first sort of hominin species, our ancestors, started hunting for aquatic species. And of course, a lot has changed in the seafood industry since then. But a lot of things actually have stayed the same as well. I mean, fishing is still very much about a combination of both the luck and the skill of the fish harvester. There's still that sort of struggle between man, and most of the fishermen are typically men, and beast. And the power and how overwhelming the ocean is. No matter how big our fishing trawlers might be, every year they still sink on the west and east coasts of Canada. So where are we today in terms of the fishing industry? Well, there's a lot of problems in the seafood supply chain, and I just want to go through a couple of them. There's a complete disconnection between the producers and consumers in the seafood industry, and that's been a huge change. I mean, 200-300 years ago, I think people typically were fairly close to the food that they were eating and had direct relationships. There's rampant mislabeling. There's been a lot of surveys and investigative reports in North America that shows about 20 to 40% of the product is mislabeled. You think you're buying one species, but it's actually another. And it's typically an endangered species mislabeled as a non-endangered, or a cheap species mislabeled as an expensive species. There's lots of misinformation and false assumptions abound in the seafood industry. And a lot of this is actually about freshness and quality, and consumers are quite confused, and actually a lot of chefs and others in the industry. Imperfect information, which leads to market manipulation. And that's typically happens at the harvester and consumer level. It's those people in the middle, the distributors and processors, that actually have access to most of the information and can manipulate the market. So harvesters are often price takers. They often have very little information in terms of prices and supply in the market. And so the seafood industry has really become a faceless global commodity driven by price and not by quality or sustainability or other attributes. And this hasn't been good for either consumers or fish harvesters. So in 2008, a group of fish harvesters that we'd been working with on Vancouver Island came to EcoTrust Canada, and this is one of them, Captain James Scarfo, a salmon fisherman. And they wanted us to look at building a seafood traceability system. And there were two reasons why the fishermen wanted this. First, they saw government regulation coming down and more government regulation around traceability. So they wanted to be proactive and get ahead of the curve and build a system that was cost effective and that they had a part in creating and not have it just jammed down their throat by government bureaucrats. And the second one is they wanted to sort of decommodify their seafood. They didn't want to, dump their product that was, quality and sustainable into this commodity market. They wanted to kind of put their own face on their seafood and market it, and hopefully get premiums for the quality and sustainability of their catch. So as a result of that, we put together what is now called This Fish, a seafood traceability system that connects the harvesters to the consumer. And it really marries material traceability with sort of new online traceability and, online social media technologies. And as Elspeth said, I call it faceability. It's really about putting a face on seafood. A lot of fishermen call our system sort of like Facebook for fishermen. And we launched our beta version in 2010 on the Pacific Coast, and then the following year, we launched our full system at thisfish.info in June of 2011. So what I'm going to do is just kind of describe to you how that actual system works, and then I want to talk a little bit about some of the behavioral changes that we see that are resulting from this traceability system. And the results are actually it's just anecdotal right now. I mean, this is still very much a live experiment. We're learning lessons, almost every week on how people are using the system. And the objectives of This Fish are really to foster trust and authenticity in the seafood value chain, to enable consumers to make more informed choices about the seafood they buy, and to reward fish harvesters and seafood businesses that are committed to promoting quality, storytelling, and sustainability through traceability. And the foundations, there's sort of three pillars of our system that are sort of the foundation, and one is technology. So we have an online system to manage and share traceability data. We have standards. So we have data transparency, coding, labeling, chain of custody standards. And then we also have validation. All that data that's uploaded into a system, how do we know it's true? So we're looking at it, putting in place assessments and auditing to make sure that the information is true and accurate. And that's really the three pillars that provides integrity to the system that we're trying to develop. So how does it work? Well, basically, when a fisherman goes out and catches some fish, they apply a unique identifier to that particular catch. Then the fish harvester, or sometimes the processor, actually uploads data related to that catch and links it to the code. And that's information about when, where, and how a fish was caught. Then as the fish travels through the supply chain, other handlers of the fish can also upload their data about how catch is either transformed or shipped or received. And then finally, when the fish arrives at a restaurant or a retailer, the chef or clerk can trace it and then share that information. And then, of course, they can also share the code. So they can give the code for the product to the consumer, who then can use a mobile phone or computer to trace the story of their seafood. So some of the features of the system I'll just kind of go through. We also obviously have a coding, tagging, and labeling system. And it varies depending on the kind of product. There you can see some of our tags on lobsters, and on the other side there's a code and a website address. Same is affixed to finfish. We also have wholesale case codes, so like filleted product that's put in cases. we have codes as well. And even on consumer items, we have some companies that have frozen products that have consumer packaging, and the codes and website address are put on those packages as well. And so the coding system is quite complex depending on the chain of custody and the type of product. This is just an example of the different kind of product flows from harvester all the way to consumer, and how we do the coding and labeling can vary depending on the product. Of course, then there's the uploading. So fishermen actually log on to the website, and here's just a part of the catch uploading form that they have to fill out. And then, of course, you can actually trace your fish. So you can go on either your mobile phone or to the full website, and you just type in the code that you see on your little tag, and then press trace, and here's the type of information that you'll receive. So here's, by way of example, is a lobster catch. So the tag would be on a lobster. You can see the fisherman who caught it and how it was caught. There's a map showing the area where it was fished, the landing port. And you can click on these expandable blue boxes, and here you can actually see a little description of the fishery and actually the eco ratings. So you can see seafood wash, sea choice, ocean wise. If it was MSC, you would see it. So we actually do not rate the sustainability of the seafood. There's a lot of organizations that do that, but what we do is we bring all that information together so that it's accessible to the consumer and it's presented in a vivid way. And you can actually click more info, and you can go to a whole profile on the fisherman, profile on the species, profile on the catch method, and get a lot more information. So we've designed it so depending on your level of interest, you can mine the information and get into more detail depending on your level of interest as a consumer. And of course, it's not just the fish harvester. In this case, you can see the fish harvester, it was caught by bottom trawl, and then the processor and the distributor have also added themselves to the chain. So it's also expandable depending on how long the seafood supply chain is. And the other thing that's, I think, really unique about our system is that it's not a one-way flow of communication. That's why it's sort of social media. It's a two-way flow. So not only does the consumer see where their fish comes from, but the fishermen, when they log into the system, they can actually see where their product is being traced and receive comments back from consumers. So I'm going to just show you an example. This is Chris Hudson. He's one of our lobster fishermen from Nova Scotia. And when he logs into this fish, he comes to a dashboard. And this is a private dashboard for the fishermen. It's password protected, so nobody else can see this data. Chris has allowed us to show his data to people just for demonstration purposes. And you can see there's a map there. And every time somebody traces one of Chris's lobsters, it creates a unique web page for that lobster. And then we collect web analytics on where the location of the tracer is, when it was traced, how many times it was traced. And then we put up a lot of this information onto Chris's dashboard so he can see where his lobsters were traced. And then he can poke into the map and zoom in to take a look at the specific villages and towns where it was traced. We can't identify the individual person, but web analytics can give us the general city. The other element is when you trace your catch, there's a little orange box that says, send a note to your fisherman. So a lot of consumers are actually sending correspondence, letters to their fish harvesters, and here are just some examples of comments sent from around the world to fish harvesters in Canada. And so what I did, I took all the comments that have been put in the system so far, and I put it into one file, and then I uploaded it to a website called Wordle, and it came out with a tag cloud. And so you can see, this is a content analysis that shows you what are consumers saying to their fishermen. And, the biggest thing they're saying is thank you. And also, great fish, good. It was very, very positive. There's a few times where the product wasn't very good, but that's the exception, it's certainly not the norm. So since we launched in 2010, the system's grown quite a bit. This year we'll have probably well over 6 million pounds of seafood traceable through our system. We started off with only a couple species on the West Coast. Now we have 12 Pacific species that are traced through our system. And in 2011, we expanded into Atlantic Canada, and this is a group of lobster fishermen in Meteghan, Nova Scotia. Now we have about 8 species in Atlantic Canada, as well as 2 species in the Dutch Wadden Sea. So we have a small pilot in operation in the Netherlands at the moment. And we have about 385 fishing vessels registered in the system right now. They're kind of equally divided on the east and west coast of Canada. And we're just starting to work with a group of freshwater fishermen on the Great Lakes as well. And in 2011, Canada's second largest retailer, Sobeys, joined this fish. And so now Canadians, they have 1,300 stores across Canada. So now Canadians can actually buy traceable catch in their store, in Sobeys across Canada. So I want to talk just briefly about some behavioral changes that we've seen as a result of the system. Again, I qualify the remarks by saying this is highly anecdotal. We're just now receiving a lot of feedback and trying to do research to find out how people are using the system. So the one thing that we found out is that our system improves quality because transparency creates accountability. If a fish harvester and a processor knows that their face is going to be on their product, they're going to take care of it a lot better. And we have a lot of anecdotal information coming back from processors that the quality is improving. Fishermen go out on shorter fishing trips to make sure the quality is higher. And a lot of the product that gets traced, for instance, is high quality. So in the lobster industry, they're tracing the highest quality product and putting it into premium markets. We're also seeing that the system encourages loyalty to local and quality processors and harvesters. You know, a retailer had no idea who caught their fish or where it usually came from. Like in terms of Pacific halibut, they call up a distributor and say, we need halibut. It could come from Alaska, it could come from British Columbia, it could come from Russia. But now with our system, we are starting to see a lot more loyalty and longer-term relationships being built in the supply chain. And we're starting to see some rewards given back to the producers for quality and sustainability. That includes price premiums that some of the fishermen are receiving. It includes actually not having prices go down. So during big swings, there's a lot more stable prices for a lot of the fishermen that are in our system. And actually, some of the fishermen have found new markets and been able to create even new products and market them because they're traceable. So these are sort of real tangible economic benefits coming back to some of the fish harvesters. The system also empowers and educates the consumers. So consumers can see information about the eco ratings and how things are caught. They can also see information about freshness and quality. So when the fish was landed, when it was frozen or processed. So where are we right now with this fish? Well, we're still growing supply, both in Canada and the US, bringing in more fishermen, more species, new fisheries. We're looking at pilots, extending our pilots in Europe, and Tasha was here in May looking at perhaps setting up a pilot in Australia, and I'll be spending probably the next week going to talk to the seafood industry in Australia about setting up a pilot here. And we need to grow demand for traceable products. And the way we're going about doing that is we're just now engaging chefs and restaurants as key market influencers. So, you know, a year ago, we really didn't have enough volume in our system to bring in the restaurants, but now there's enough volume going through our system that we're going to start to bring in restaurants and chefs into our system. And we're going to start to experiment with new approaches to engage consumers in tracing their fish and perhaps help to change behaviors. So we actually got Sobeys to run a trace and win contest. So people could trace their fish and win a gift card of $200 every week. They did a draw. So we're looking at various ways to engage and excite the consumers and possibly even kids. We get a lot of kids sending fishermen emails, and a lot of teachers have approached us as well about using it as an educational tool. And we're also expanding. We've actually just started up a forced traceability system. It's just it's in its very fledgling state at the moment. And we've had so many farmers approach us that we're just now starting to look at using some of the technologies for farming. And just to wrap up, this is what it's all about, I guess. It's about creating a more sustainable and more economically viable industry for the future. So thank you very much, and if you have any questions.